Welcome to Module 2. In this module, we'll talk about stress, what stress is, and what the role of stress is for human beings. But why are we talking about stress when the course is first responders mental health? Well, mental health is really an outcome of, normal human processes gone awry. Stress is one of the key components that affects mental health. So to understand how we get there, we need to start at the beginning. So then what is stress? What is the role of stress? Why is stress important? What does stress do for us? So stress is really a very primitive biophysical response. It's the way that we as human beings protect ourselves and stay alive. When a human is under stress, it causes changes to the brain, chemical changes, hormonal changes. It elevates your heart rate and breathing. It secretes increased adrenaline. And really what it does is it gets you ready to protect yourself. It gets you ready to fight or to run away. So all of your energy goes away from your organs and goes into your muscles to prepare you. Stress is believed to be what has allowed our species to continue from back to caveman days. How is it that we protected ourselves against acute danger? Well, it's what allowed us to thrive and to survive. What stress truly does is it triggers the fight or flight response. As I said, you prepare to fight or you prepare to run away, fight or flight, and it's what has allowed us to continue as a species. Now, today, stress serves the exact same function, although very few of us find ourselves in truly lethal situations on a day-to-day, even a week-to-week or year-to-year basis. We're not often thrust into situations where life and death are truly at stake. However, stress still does the same thing. It elevates your heart rate, makes your breathing rapid, gets you ready to run or to fight, whether that's at a job interview, whether that's dealing with graduate school. Stress has the same function today. So let's look at a few different types of stress and understand what we mean by these terms so that as we move through, we'll be on the same page. So I'm going to talk about 4 different types of stress. I'm going to talk about personal stress, burnout, occupational stress, and critical stress. So let's take a look at each of those. Personal stress is what we all have. Sometimes it can be minor, sometimes it can feel significant, sometimes it can feel overwhelming. But personal stress is what we have in our everyday lives. That's caused by typical everyday types of things, whether you're having a fight with a significant other, whether you're sick or a loved one is sick, you're caring for your children, but you also have to do a number of other things at the same time, and you're struggling to prioritize and to make sure everything happens. Or you're caring for an elderly relative. You move from house to house if you have to leave your apartment or sell your house, or as my social work professors used to say to me all the time, even positive change is stressful. So maybe you're selling a house and moving to your dream house. That's still stressful. You have to pack everything up, you have to coordinate the move, you have to move your utilities, you have to change kids' schools potentially. Lots of things like that cause stress, for good or bad. You get the same type of bodily response of elevated heart rate, rapid breathing, hormonal changes. It's still the same, whether it's good or bad stress. And financial problems. What most Americans experience as a significant stress are financial problems. So that's personal stress. So what's burnout? Well, burnout is a term that's not well understood and is widely used, which means that everyone has a very different meaning for it. So it is related to your job, some type of stress in your workplace, and it's characterized by a few different bodily responses. Exhaustion, lack of enthusiasm or motivation, feelings of ineffectiveness or frustration. So, what do I mean by that? You don't feel like you can do a good job anymore. You just don't feel like your performance is up to where it used to be. It's not you at your par, or you become easily frustrated in the workplace. You don't like a particular policy in the workplace, but rather than respond to it or deal with it, you become frustrated. You just don't want to get up and go to work. You may call in sick more than you normally do. Um, and overall, you're just not doing a good job. Um, Eventually, an employer may come to you and say, "Hey, what's going on? This isn't you," or you get a bad evaluation, or that's burnout. It's relatively low level uh, workplace stress. It doesn't beyond the internalized, I'm not doing a good job, I don't feel good, I just don't want to be here. Um, that's really where the response lies, and it's something that can typically be remediated by a vacation, say. So it's relatively low level, but it's personally distressing for someone who's used to um, enjoying going to work, being highly motivated and highly functional at work. Um, but it's burnout. It's relatively low level. As opposed to occupational stress. Occupational stress is an extension of burnout. If you don't address burnout, you're likely to become more occupationally stressed. When I said at burnout, people use it in different ways. Some people refer to burnout as occupational stress. I see them as truly steps along a continuum, with occupational stress being broader and having a more of a depth of stress than burnout. Whereas burnout can be remediated by a vacation, occupational stress typically can't. So, what do I mean by occupational stress? Maybe you go on a vacation expecting to come back, feel refreshed, and you walk into work the next day and you feel pretty much the same way as when you left. You may be overwhelmed, you may be frustrated, you may feel that you're not being compensated for the work you do, you may feel that you're called a manager, for instance, but you're doing director's level responsibilities. You may be doing a lot more than other people with a higher title and being paid less than those folks. Um, you don't feel as though you have the support of your workplace. You don't feel as though your supervisors truly give you the support you need to do your job, or that your colleagues don't respect the work that you're doing. And ultimately, that you don't have any way or very few ways to affect this change, to control the work, to control the pace, to control the flow of the work. So as you can see, burnout is, I just really don't want to be here. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job, to I have no control over what I'm doing. I'm just going through the motions because it doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to change anything. You can see how burnout can roll into occupational stress. And it's in this area, in the occupational stress area, that we'll be spending most of our time talking through the rest of the course. But just understand that it adds a depth to the burnout, and obviously it would be harder to mitigate if and when you get to this level. But it aligns to control, support, general workplace pressures, and that you're expected to perform beyond your skills, resources, tools. So that's occupational stress. And then critical stress impacts first responders, but it impacts civilians as well. It can impact anyone. So critical stress is any event that over at least temporarily overwhelms your ability to cope. So what is critical stress? School shooting. Anyone involved in a school shooting will be experiencing critical stress. However well they manage it, they'll be experiencing critical stress, whether it's the teacher who is protecting students, whether it's the parent who's arriving at the school looking for their kids. That is critical stress. It will overwhelm your ability to cope at that moment. These events they're very powerful events, and they're not what we expect to experience. Now, that being said, and we'll talk about this more in the next module, but critical stress can be different from culture to culture. So if you're in a war-torn country, a school shooting may be stressful, may not be a critical stress event because you're used to people being killed on a regular basis. Doesn't make it right. It just means that you have your experience is different. For in this country, a school place or a workplace shooting is critical. That's not to connote that it's right or wrong or that it's better or worse in a culture. It's more meant to speak to the experience of the culture and how cultures tend to conceptualize and cope with that experience. Remember, again, it's overwhelming your ability to cope at that moment. Critical stress events generate strong emotional content to the point where at most critical events where you watch them on the news, you'll see that most people, including first responders, are broken down, crying. They're huddled together. They don't know what to do. They're wandering around. They're not sure what to say or where to go. It's overwhelming their ability to cope. And critical stress, when not treated, can have serious long-term consequences. And those long-term consequences can include things like post-traumatic stress disorder, um, but we're not talking about PTSD here. We'll talk about that in a later module. But just know that critical stress is important to be treated and treated aggressively so that people can get back to uh, their way they're used to living and used to coping. So that's critical stress, and that is, as we talked about, very different from occupational stress, very different from burnout. But they're four different types of stress, and these are the stresses that we will be looking at in subsequent modules to understand how it is that first responders experience these and where it is that first responders may have difficulty experiencing these and how they'll affect their personal life and their work life. So that's the end of Module 2, the Module 2 lecture. Go ahead and finish the readings, and I'll meet you in the discussion board where we'll talk about stress and we'll talk about what your experience has been with stress, how you experience stress, and whether this makes sense or whether you have questions still about the different types of stress that we're talking about, because it'll be important to understand those four different types of stress. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next lecture.